For example, I can share a personal story with you. Like about 5 years ago, I was invited to do the Renault truck branding center, like all the automobiles, and BMW did one, and Porsche. So we were, as the first Chinese architect, were invited to do the headquarter and branding center in Lyon, in France, for the Renault truck. The reason we were invited because Deng Xiaoping in the early days worked there as an intern. Okay. Yeah, Deng Xiaoping, Deng Xiaoping, the Paramount, he actually, when he was in Paris, he worked for Lyon for the Renault truck. And during the wars, Renault truck was actually in partnership with Chinese East Wind, Dongfeng truck company. So all of a sudden, when Renault acquired Volvo truck and Nissan truck, there is a sense of Chinese highways will be basically run with Renault truck. So we were invited in as some very geopolitical consideration. So we entered the competition, thought, wow, this is cool. I can travel to Lyon and drinking wine and just hanging out and eating good food and then do some buildings. And then we actually went to the final stage, became one of the 2 finalists. But that time, then we started to feel, okay, now being a Chinese company and private company, how would you get actually being noted and actually continue the collaboration? And then we started to look for people, the state government in China, the European office. They said, well, because you're in private business, the government can really assist you to really get your things in. But then, if you all remember, Japanese architects in the 70s, they were all brought everywhere by their business corporations and government even, actually, even today. French architects, when they go to China, it was heavily backed by government. It was heavily the incentive, the fees would be lower in China, but the government says, I will match up the fee you get and to match your French level of fee. If they compete for, let's say, Chinese National Theater, and then the French government say, okay, we'll donate organ for you so you can hire. I still think there is really kind of this somewhat of a national behavior that behind the creative thing, but Chinese never do that. China don't do it.
On that level, I mean, that's less of political.
Okay, I'm sharing. So, okay, when we were in the finalists, all of a sudden there's a Chinese PhD women student in Renault was actually put in custody because she took home work. And then all of a sudden, so there was a whole incident. Remember there was like 4 or 5 years ago, and she was actually caught because she brought work home. And so then if you really recall why that happened, so we were actually stopped there. That happened is a couple months ago, there was an auto show in Hanover when China showed the first time a $2,000, what is that? That's a QQ. So all of a sudden the whole European automaker is like, okay, China is gone. It's not our market anymore. China now knows how to make cheap vehicles. We're out of the picture. So I think there's still a geopolitical thing going on.
I was only referring to the creative spirit. But on the other hand, as in terms of policy, I do think that the creative people, because as you said earlier, that we tend to work singly, that sometimes we do have to recognize there is power in numbers when it comes to actually disseminating our work so that it can be exposed. And government sanctions and government support or private enterprise support within national conditions are really very useful for the creative industries. I would say industry. Exactly. So Yeohlee, you have one last question. I know we have 1 minute.
It's 1 minute. Okay.
Come on, say it.
It's going to digress. I was going to ask what during the Olympics we had world-class architects come to Beijing and build all those fabulous architecture. And I wanted to know how the Chinese architects felt.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, as a matter of fact, I was actually right in the middle devising. I was actually the consultant for the IOC, the International Olympic Committee. I gave a lot of ideas who to invite for competing world building, actually jury members as well. So after that, this generation of architects felt we made such a difficult decision at that time, which is get all the international stars. But then we thought, well, what are the Chinese architects would do? Because in the 70s, when Japan had the Olympic, that's when Japan promoted really their new generation of architects through the expo, through the Olympic. But what is going to happen in Beijing? So we feel a little regret, actually. But in the middle of that, and I kind of was discussing with the Beijing Olympic Committee, I said, well, all of a sudden now you have this expo of world stars. Where are the Chinese new architects? How they're going to do? In 20 years, when you look back, we actually had a great building, but we didn't generate a whole new generation of Chinese architects.
That's right.
That would be a cultural, really kind of problem. So all of a sudden, the city says, well, let's create another promenade to invite Chinese architects. If you go there, there's actually a lawn cuts in the ground. They have different pavilions that actually in the ground. That's actually the Chinese architect's word after we have reflected what we've done wrongly. Anyway, so I think it's a very complicated topic. On one hand, we like to kind of contribute to the world as one creative endeavor, but on the other hand, there's still, as a creativity is very vulnerable. It still needs public support through forms of tax money or through forms of government. So this can be talked for long, but I just wanted to point it out.
On the other hand, I think in some ways we could possibly empower ourselves, because I can't help but sort of mention two of our C100 members who have actually done a lot in terms of individually push us forward. One, of course, is the Venerable Mr. Pei, through the Commission of the Louvre, which really became an ambassadorial moment. There were very tough times when the French were so against and racist about the whole issue. And of course, what we're talking about is boundaries. I mean, there's nothing wrong with the French coming to do work in China. There's nothing wrong with Chinese to do work in France. And then, of course, Maya Lin, who as a student fired everyone's imagination by winning the Vietnam War Memorial. And, of course, that went through a lot of arduous moments where the veterans didn't think an abstracted memorial adequately expressed their grief and their pain. But, of course, when it finally opened, its simplicity, again, coming full circle, is so powerful that it moved people. But just by the gesture of dissension and reascension from the depths of our planet. And finally, I really do feel that it's an issue of collective and individual, and that we have to support each other and yet at the same time remain independent. I mean, and crossing boundaries. I mean, I just am sick and tired of waiting for any government or any person to help me out. So I've kind of... I've moved to the dark side and become a developer. But I'm bringing all of you with me because I've worked in China, and just in response to the same reason, I thought it's very odd that the Chinese government do not want to promote Chinese architecture during the Olympics. But it's never too late. So we're working on a project in Chengdu, which surprises you I didn't mention. I want to invite all Chinese architects to work on an all local project. So I think it is very important to both think collectively and independently. On that note, I think our time is up, and I thank you. I hope this is coherent for you. It's sort of, and not too rambling. It's a very big topic, so thank you.